Okay, welcome everyone to today's debate. I am pasting the motion that you have prepared in the chat box, so you have the reference to that. Welcome to Team Pro. If I'm not wrong, that's Dettori, is that right? Yeah. I will ask you to introduce yourself and tell us what role you're going to cover, and the same for the Lion Kings, is that correct? Team Op, yeah. I introduce first myself. My name is Giulia Bertagnoli-Lice. I am Responsabile di Sala, so chair judge tonight here for this debate, and I would like the panel to introduce themselves now too.
Hello everyone, my name is Valeria Sturniolo and I'm a panelist, judge panelist.
Good afternoon, my name is Cinzia Zuccarini and I'm a judge panelist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll briefly recall all the general rules that you should know now because you're not new to the tournament. I will time your speeches, but you are invited to time your speeches too on your own, so that if any issue about the volume, for example, of Ting is not audible, you do or have your own timers. Secondly, I would like to remind you that in order for you to cast a POI, you just unmute yourself and say it aloud, okay? POI. Please make sure that either you accept it or refuse it audibly, all right? First minute and the 6th minute are protected time for each speech. No POIs are possible for the reply speech, okay? I think I've recalled all of it. And I would like to invite you to introduce yourself. So we do have your positions as speakers. Team Pro.
I'm the first speaker, Sofia Bonifai.
Okay.
I am the second speaker, Beatrice Zedda.
Okay.
I'm the third speaker, Camilla Nappi.
Okay. Who's giving the reply speech in your team?
Me.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. What about Team Op?
I'm the first speaker. I'm sorry. I'm the first speaker, Martina Natuzzi, and I'll also be doing the reply speech.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm the second speaker, Emanuele Fracalvieri.
Good evening, I am Luca Pantrandolfo and I'll be the third speaker of the opposition team.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much indeed. So let's declare the debate started. The debate started. So I welcome you all to this fair debate tonight. Debating the motion, this House would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. As for novel foods, refers to foods introduced in Europe from May 15, 1997, whose marketing is currently regulated by regulation EU 2015-2283. I would invite Team Pro to take the floor and start this debate.
Thank you. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, I'm the first speaker of the proposition team and I'll present our first argument. Beatrice, the second speaker, will present the second argument and she'll do the reply speech too, and Camilla, she'll do the first speech and rebut the opposition arguments. So the motion we are going to analyze today is that this House would require all foods currently on the market to undergo the European safety assessment mandated for novel foods. And first of all, we need to know what novel foods are and which assessment they need to undergo. As the INFOSLIDE motion tells us, we know that novel foods are those foods that were introduced in Europe from the 15th of May in 1997. And for example, they are regulated by the so-called novel food regulation. And they are insects, plant-based proteins, traditional foods from other cultures, and products from new technologies. And under the novel food regulation, a new food must be evaluated by the European Food Safety Authority, the EFSA. And there is an independent agency, founded in 2002, that need to give scientific advice on the risk related to the food chain. So not only related to what we eat, so as humans, but also related to animal feed, animal health, and plant health. So anything that could harm life being. And we strongly believe, as our team line, that we need all the food actually currently on the European markets, not only novel food, to undergo the European safety assessment, as we can this can assure safety and health conditions to all Europeans. As we know, the EFSA analyzes novel foods across several criteria, so toxicological criteria, allergenicity, and nutritional impact. The European consumers, in fact, are the primary stakeholders. They bear the health risk of unsafe and unsustainably tasted food. And so this could, of course, cause illnesses and decrease in the quality of life of an European. So, anybody who can eat traditional food. And the second stakeholder that we can analyze, we can talk to, are the food producer, the manufacturer, those who are actually present in the market, who buy, who sell their products, and having whole equal standard for all foods would advantage their work, and would also give some trust from clients to the food producer, food seller. And then, of course, we need to talk about the healthcare system, the public health authorities. Those are maybe the most important. We can tell.
PUI.
Sorry.
PUI.
Yes.
What are the benefits for small food producers?
Yes, I think the food producer would be getting an advantage in having the same criteria for all. As I told before, they could have all the safety assessment and not have any difference in the novel foods or traditional food. So this would be an advantage for their work. I was saying that the healthcare system and the public health authorities are the most important, I think, stakeholders, as they need to prevent the damage caused by the food problems, illnesses related to the diet. In fact, we know, and this is a reason of why we are discussing it, that most of the time the regulation related to food regulation happens after the damage has been made, and not as prevention. This seems to be used for novel foods, even for traditional foods, and so dealing with a problem before it happens, and with, of course, the help of the healthcare system and the regulation given by the EFSA. Then it would be also good to have equal standards for all of the food, to know what we are eating, and to prevent all the risk. Now I'd like to go on with my argument, now that I've analyzed the motion. And I think that one of the main reasons why this motion needs to happen, so this change needs to happen, is that the outdated safety assumption no longer reflects the modern scientific knowledge. In fact, we know that most of the food currently sold in the European Union entered the markets decades ago without ever undergoing the type of assessment that are mandated for novel foods. And their safety is assumed on their traditional and historical use, their consumption. But first of all, novel foods need to go through a very specific analysis that our food didn't, the food we eat every day didn't have undergo to, and then this is a problem, and our history can show that this is a problem. This is problematic. For example, I'll tell you about the insaturated fats, the trans fats. They are the fats that were used from the 1950 to 1990, and they were used to replace butter, animal fats, but starting from the 90s, there were some studies carried on that showed that their use was linked to cardiovascular diseases, ictus, and diabetes. And so the EFSA in 2004 confirmed their harm. And this confirmation of their harm was this late because they weren't a novel food. They were used every day from decades, but they didn't actually know that they were harmful. And so this damage had happened because... yes?
Are you aware of the fact that these foods are creating these type of problems, not because of the lack of the regulation, but because every kind of person that eats these foods can be stable in eating them?
I didn't understand your POI.
Are you aware of the fact that the problem isn't the lack of regulation, but how we manage eating this food?
This is about the lack of regulation, because if we know how to manage it in this food, we, with the regulation, with the correct regulation, we wouldn't need it that much. And this is what this is being confirmed that it was harm after some studies. And I'd now like to go on. And as I told you before, the novel food assessment contains detailed analysis and something, as I said, all the regulation failed to address. And this would be helpful to know new things about what we are eating. For example, we know that there can be pesticide residues in our food due to agricultural and environmental changes. Then we know that the INFOSLIDE carry on some evaluation on allergenicity testing that is very important in the last decades, as people are most likely to gain some allergies due to climate change, pollution, and lifestyle changes. So the food we may have eaten before couldn't be as safe as it was for people that were born decades ago. So by applying the same scientific rigor to all food, I think that the European Union would modernize its food safety system, prevent and avoid health crisis, and align the regulation with the current scientific knowledge rather than updated assumption. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the first speaker for proposition team, who spoke for 8 minutes and 5 seconds. When all the panel are all right, yeah, I would invite then opposition team to take the floor whenever you are ready.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening. I'm the first speaker of opposition, and I will start my speech with rebuttal. After that, I will say my argumentation, and the other two will be brought to you by the second speaker of opposition. Firstly, I have to say that this debate is not about whether food should be safe. It already is. It's about whether regulations should be proportionate. Firstly, I have to say that the first speaker of proposition said that the quality of life of Europeans is ruined by not enough regulations, and she brought the example of trans fats. But as we already entered at NRPOI, trans fats aren't this isn't the main problem. This is an actual cause why we are debating this. Because this isn't about safety, but this is about the habits of Europeans, the unhealthy habits of Europeans. In fact, in moderation, these foods are totally safe. Then she even said that small companies would benefit from this. But we will show you that this is completely wrong. In fact, we will show you this in our second argumentation, since these assessments are really great investments that many small companies cannot afford. So this causes an unfair competition between large companies and smaller companies. Then she said that foods should be assessed again because we have more scientific knowledge, but she didn't take into account at all that foods are already being regulated and in accord to our modern knowledge. In fact, it's not foods are regulated ex post, and it's not like they are regulated at all because they are regulated with EFSA assessment. In fact, in the EU, we have different safety assessment requirements for novel and non-food. For novel foods, the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, conducts a scientific risk assessment, and the European Commission member states decide if to authorize the sale and consumption of the food, basing their decision on the EFSA opinion. So a novel food cannot be marketed in the EU unless it has undergone a positive FSA safety assessment, and applicant and food businesses pay all costs associated with producing the data and FSA assessment fees. So the Commission does not pay for the testing or evaluation, and the system is entirely applicant funded. A typical FSA assessment for a complex novel food can easily reach 200,000 to 600,000 or even more euros in investments. For novel food instead, they are presumed safe unless evidence shows otherwise, but they remain under continuous regulatory oversight. The system works under General Food Safety Obligation. Under the 14th article of the General Food Law, food shall not be placed under the market if it is unsafe. And according to US standards, food is unsafe if it's injurious to health or unfit for human consumption. Its obligation applies continuously, not just at market entry. In fact, to ensure food safety, we also have an export control system that works to all actors. Food businesses must ensure food safety at all stages of production and distribution, and must withdraw or recall products if risk emerges. National authorities instead conduct official control, inspections, samplings, and enforcement on emergency measures on national level, and the EFSA and the Commission perform a risk assessment and could adopt emergency measures if the food becomes unsafe. RSFF, so the Rapid Alert System for Food and Feed, is a real-time notification system Does anyone else have any PRs?
Yes.
Okay, Camilla, cast your PI.
Okay. Don't you think that preventing a problem instead of just adjusting it when it's already unsafe is not the reasonable option?
We aren't just adjusting it when it's already unsafe. In fact, it is already being prevented. Food is continuously controlled during production with the export control system. So action isn't taken just when it is already proven to be unsafe. So as a position, we want to maintain the difference between the treatment of old and new foods, but we want to introduce a risk-based reassessment for all foods, with two important steps. For high-risk categories, like processed meats, or high mercury feeds, fish, or foods with well-known allergenic potential, we will require a periodic testing and reporting. In this way, all foods are monitored scientifically without treating all foods as novel. And this is an improvement from proposition. In fact, only a small subset of all foods should undergo this assessment, keeping it proportionate. To cover the cost that would arise, we will use funds from the US investment banks for small food businesses which already exist. We want to create a public QR database of food indicators for all foods to make known the presence of contaminants, additives, allergens, consumption trends, and incidents. All this to build customer trust and support evidence-based assessment. So now I will go on with our team line. The first argument is about regulatory harm, the second is about unfair competitiveness, and the third is about price increase. So the PUG model would cause regulatory harm. In fact, in proposition world, EFSA safety assessment became mandatory for all foods, even the one already on the market. But this would bring regulatory harm as regulators would face a severe overload. Why? Because FSA work with limited resources that are specifically catered to assist a small numbers of food. This proposal to those limited resources, like time, funds, etc., would instead be spread across all foods. This leads to a dilution effect. All foods typically require intense assessment due to uncertainty, but additional foods generally require minimal oversight, as risks are already well documented through decades of consumption and post-market surveillance. We can understand this concept more with this image. If you have 10 resources, novel foods need 9, while old foods only need 1. If you give both foods 5 resources, we are giving all foods 4 more than they need. So we would have reduced safety for customers because novel foods would not get sufficient scrutiny, inefficient regulations, delayed approvals, and also a public trust erosion. Moreover, the proposal violates the principle of proportionality, a cornerstone of EU law.
I'm sorry, Martina.
And good
Time is up.
practice. In our world, instead, only high-risk foods will undergo periodic FAA assessment. So FAA can focus maximum attention on generally high-risky foods, while low-risk foods are still monitored adequately. We therefore have not waste of regulatory effort. And with this, I end my speech.
Thank you very much for the first speech, to the first speaker of opposition team, who spoke for 9 minutes, 23 seconds. Now, when the panel are ready, yeah? Cinzia, too?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will give the floor to second speaker from proposition team whenever you are ready.
Okay, I'm ready, and my speech will start in 1, 2, 3. Good evening, I'm Beatrice Zedda, the second speaker of the proposition team, and I will demonstrate to you that establishing an equal safety standard for all food is the only way to earn consumer trust and force the food industry to actually innovate. But before moving on with my speech, I would like to rebut to what the opposition team said. So first of all, they said that this motion is not about how safe the foods are, but about like European consuming habits. But I think this is missing the core meaning of the motion, because there's a problem here. The actual problem is that we need to regulate our food all in the same way to make sure that Europeans are eating well on all fronts. Also, they seem to be very concerned with how this will have an effect on small businesses. But actually, this is not like, it's not too aggressive economically. And also they propose to establish a database, which is also money consuming and expensive. Meanwhile, our counter plan that I will present later on, we think it is a better solution that allows us to actually make sure the food we eat is safe, and it won't be, and I'll show you, it won't be that expensive, and it won't damage businesses at all. So to go on with my speech, my partner has already established that core truth that the 1997 cutoff is an arbitrary regulational fiction, a science gap that leaves the vast majority of our diet untested against modern science. And the opposition is trying to defend this loophole by claiming that it's too difficult or too expensive, especially addressing small businesses. But to be truly, it's not like that. When public health is on the line, the cost is irrelevant. The scientific verification of public health is the only thing that matters here. This brings me to our central argument. Mandating this universal assessment is essential to restore consumer faith, drive market progress, and crucially, also, it is entirely manageable. The problem we are addressing lies in the current two-tier safety system, which creates both consumer cynicism and market distortion, considering the reality. Okay, so consumer, know that the European Food Safety Authority puts a newly developed product, a novel food, through an intense and rigorous assessment. This evaluation is comprehensive, checking for everything. Yes?
I read that EFSA works with limited resources, and with your model, these resources will be spread across all foods, and so it will be more difficult to preserve the health.
No, actually, we will show to you that this won't damage in any way the market or also like the foods. So, as I was saying, as I was saying, we check everything of a novel food, from toxicological impact to allergenicity to overall natural safety. Yet, highly processed food, a daily staple, gets a free pass just because it used to be consumed before 1997. This regulatory double standard, destroys public trust, because when the government asks consumer to rely on history instead of modern and verifiable science, it breeds suspicion and undermines the very institution tasked with safeguarding the health. Furthermore, this setup creates a profound and illogical financial incentive. Why would a company spend years and millions of euros going through the novel food assessment, to prove a new safer ingredient is acceptable, meanwhile their competitors and another company could simply use an outdated and cheaper and scientifically unverified legacy ingredient that is protected by this 1997 loophole. The current laws is essentially a subside for the status quo and actively pushes companies who try to be safer and more transparent. To fix this, we must look at a specific requirement of the novel food regulation. For example, it demands that new foods prove they are not nutritionally disadvantaged. This is a powerful and necessary safeguard, but it is entirely absent for the traditional and often ultra-processed foods that form the bulk of the modern diet, and which are often primary contributors to the diet-related diseases. The European Union itself has demonstrated it understands the need for modern checks by mandating the re-evaluation of all foods addictive authorized before 2009. We are simply applying that logical existing principle to the entire food product. Now, we must address the opposition likely primary attacks that this motion is unworkable or massive, as they try to tell us multiple times already. This is a predictable tactic that fails when it's faced with a rational plan. The proposition is not advocating for chaos. We are advocating for a structured, manageable, and phased implementation. Our plan proves that the system will not collapse. We will not test every single food simultaneously, of course, but we will mandate a comprehensive reevaluation in phases to ensure practicality. Crucially, we want to make it absolutely clear that we are not arguing to pull products off the shelf during the assessment. So we don't want to cause harm to the companies itself. We're not taking a product off the shelf unless we are sure that it could be dangerous. So the current marketing of the product continues when we instruct the EFSA to prioritize testing based on non-emergencies, risks, and high consumption volume in the early years. This means tackling things like highly processed staple ingredients and food using new technologies first. Following that, then we can integrate the evaluation of specific addictive and extract before finally moving on to the broader coverage of traditional non-processed crops. Only if the assessment reveals a clear and undeniable risk to public health will regulators act to take the product off the market, as I say. This phase risk-based approach ensures minimal disruption and maximizes safety. Ultimately, this motion is not a bureaucratic nightmare. It is a necessary market correction. By demanding that all food meets the same high standard, we eliminate the economic incentive to cling to outdated or scientifically questionable ingredients. As we said, why should a company actually decide to be innovative and to taste their food when there's a cheaper way? But we don't want that. We want all food to be equally scientifically proved. So we forced the entire food industry to prioritize safety and innovation. We need our food system to catch up with modern science. This shift ensures that, moving forward, safety is based on scientific proof and not on a historical privilege. We urge you to affirm the motion. Thank you. My speech ends now.
Thank you very much for your speech, Beatrice. It lasted 8 minutes and 2 seconds. Now, when all the panel are ready, I would call second speaker from opposition team. The floor is yours.
Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, the EU already knows the difference between the unknown and the well-known, and proposition wants to pretend that difference doesn't matter. During this debate, the methods to win are regulatory proportionality, food safety, and economic stability of food market. And to this page, we'll see how all these factors are exclusive to our side of the house. As regards economic stability, to let you understand how important is this point, we have dedicated an documentation. Now I'll analyze the metrics of regulatory proportionality and food safety. First of all, in proposition world, EFSA safety assessment became mandatory for all foods. And we know that EFSA works with limited resources that are specifically catered to assist a small number of foods. And with this proposal, these resources will instead be spread across all foods. And because if we have like 20 resources and novel foods need like 18 resources, while all foods need just 2, and we give both 10 resources, we are giving all foods 8 more than they need, therefore wasting them, and giving 8 less resources of what needed to novel foods. And this leads us to some negative impacts, obviously. But first of all, novel foods may not get sufficient scrutiny, and so this led to the risk of unsafe products reaching the market. Second, resources wasted on low risk of foods, and as a consequence, less attention to emerging hazards. And third, novel foods are delayed because EFSA capacity is overburdened, and so the innovation slows. And then, if unsafe products appear or approvals are delayed, consumer confidence in EU food system declines. And so this leads to instead, in our world, only high-risk all foods undergo periodic EFSA assessment, so EFSA can focus on maximum attention on genuinely risky foods. And while low-risk foods are still monitored adequately, we therefore have no waste of regulatory effort while the foods receive full required scrutiny. So in this way, we can say that all these factors are exclusive to our side of the house. Now I'll develop our second argumentation, that is PUG model causes unfair competitiveness. Universal EFSA assessment for all foods creates unfair competitiveness, harming SMEs, traditional producers, and market diversity. As documented by industry analysis for Food Navigator and Legacy, an EFSA assessment requires an investment of approximately 200,000, 600,000 per product. This cost at the moment is required only for novel foods. Because of this, in the status quo, according to EU Commission, 1, as highlighted by European Commission of Food Drinks Europe, 90% of all foods is produced by small and medium companies. And so SMEs lack of resources to develop new high-tech food products or undergo the lengthy and costly EFSA assessment for novel foods, and they are more likely to specialize in existing foods products that have already gained approval under existing regulation. Second, according to industry reports from USAID and Food Drink Europe, large companies account for 78% of production of novel foods because they have greater financial resources, so they can afford the substantial cost of EFSA approval. But what would happen in POP world? Because POP wants to extend EFSA assessment to all foods, this means that all food companies would need to sustain the high costs. Even small companies. Problem is that large multinationals can absorb this cost, while SMEs and artisanal producers cannot. So, in POP world, small and medium enterprises, to make up for the loss of capital, have two possibilities. One, rise of the price of the products they sell, and this will tackle it in argument 3. And second, reduce the quality of their products. In both cases, they will lose customers, because if the prices are higher, customers will buy from large companies, and the same will happen if the quality is lower. So, in long term, small companies unable to comply will exit the market, reducing product diversity. In this way, market power shifts.
Yeah.
Okay.
But don't you think that if the government will take this as a problem, it will also give financial help to ensure that all food are tasted equally and safely?
Okay, I'll explain it later. I'll go on with my commentation. And in our world instead, because EFSA assessment is needed for all foods, only for high-risk ones, so only a limited number of companies will need to pay those costs. So because they are a small number, the EU Investment Bank will be able to help such small companies to cover this cost. And as said by the first speaker, this is exclusive to our side of the house because funds available are limited and can only realistically cover a small subset of companies, exactly what our countermodel targets. In contrast, proposition plans would require all food companies to pay the full EFSA assessment cost, which is far beyond the capacity of these funds, making it feasible for SMEs. So, in our world, all of the negative impacts Jack explained would not exist. Now I'll go on with our third documentation, that is POP model causes systemic collateral damages. Proposition isn't just adding a safety check. They are breaking the structural backbone of the European food system. It is how the disaster unfolds step by step. First of all, food demand is price inelastic and people must eat, but a 600,000 fixed cost, 600,000 euros fixed cost for EFSA assessment cannot be absorbed by small producers, and it is immediately transferred to consumers as a massive price hike. This is a regressive arm that disproportionately punishes low-income families, reducing their access to quality food and nutrition. Second, traditional food are rather thin margins, so the EFSA cost is an economic death sentence for them. These products will vanish or become expensive luxury goods. We are sacrificing centuries of cultural heritage for a hypothetical safety gain. And third, but last but not least, only big food can survive these barriers to entry. By eliminating SME competition, proposition ensures market concentration. And less competition means higher prices long term, less innovation, and lower quality for everyone. And so, look panel, the bottom line is clear. A policy that bankrupts small businesses and taxes the poorest families isn't a safety measure, it's a crisis. You don't make food safer by making it disappear. That is why we must oppose. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the second speaker for opposition team. Your speech lasted 7 minutes and 44 seconds. I would now move on, if the panel agree. The speech of the third speaker for proposition team.
Can I start? Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. My name is Camilla Nappi, and I'm the third speaker of the proposition team. I'm here to rebut what the opposition team has said, and also to strengthen what has been said by my teammates. First of all, I would like to rebut what the first speaker said. She said that food is already safe, but we have data to support that it isn't, as there's been recalls around 14,000 recalls only in 2024, which of 5,800 were under the EU. Of these 5,800 recalls of foods that were already on the market, 90% of those were traditional foods, not novel foods, which have already been regulated with the 1997 regulations, but traditional foods, things that enter your houses, things that your family has been eating for generations, things that we can't trace illnesses to yet. Also, she said that small companies will perish because of these regulations that we want to integrate in the market. But we want to say that in our plan, we aren't saying that every company should pay for the regulations. It would be the EU, the EU that will pay to take those foods off the market. And also, the EU could spend and give subsidies to those companies because they already do. They already
UI,
do. I accept.
are you aware of the fact that in European Union we don't have infinite money? So if we spend 5 years, for example, to a control, but then with your model we decide to spend the half for a control and the half for the other control of, for example, the traditional food, do you know how worsen these controls will be?
Thank you for your question. This point that you brought up is actually extremely good for what I'm about to say, which is correlated to the topic that I was about to bring up, which is how much money the EU spends on healthcare, which is around $16 billion just to pay for the illnesses that are caused from the foods that were safe, that were traditional, that were low risk, as you said. So the first speaker also said that food is already unsafe food is already prevented, but it isn't. That's why there's so many recalls in the market. The EU
PI?
takes products. I accept.
So your model is like saying that car accidents happen because cars are insufficiently regulated, rather than because people speed or drink or ignore seatbelts.
Thank you for your question. No, what I'm saying is that the 16 billion that I listed aren't related just to illnesses in general. They're related to foods that weren't regulated enough. Foods, for example, do you know the acrylamide, which is a carcinogen that is implanted in foods such as bread, which is probably what you would have considered a low risk food, a traditional food, and fries, which are on the table of every American person, every European person in fast foods in many ways. But those type of foods in 2017, I think, were took away from the market because they discovered that a product which is called acrylamide could cause cancer, specifically in kids, which were the main audience of this product. So one POI that was made to the second speaker of my team was that the EU has limited resources, but as I said, the 16 billions that the EU spends on trying to heal people from these illnesses can be prevented, and our plan consists in about $5 billion between recalling products and subsidies to the factories, which, as anyone could see, is 11 billions out of the EU's limited resources. Also, the limited resources aren't an excuse for letting people die, letting people live in unsafe conditions and eat unsafe foods. which is why we believe that prevention is the only way to help people eat safe foods, help people stay healthy and not take illnesses, because it is inevitable that any food...
PUI?
I don't accept it. We believe that there isn't anything such as a low-risk food, because just because we haven't traced an illness yet to a food doesn't mean that it's safe. We can see it, as I said, with bread, we can see it with fries, we can see it with many things that happen during our world industry. So another point that I would like to bring up is that there is many recalls of products that get taken away from the industries, and we can spend about $1 million to $3 million per recall, per product that gets taken away from the market. The EU spends an enormous amount of money just to recall one product from the market. Do you think that the limited resources that the EU has can be spent to nitpick on every single item that is on the market, on the shelves of the shops, just because you people don't want to regulate a system that is already falling apart? We believe that regulating the system, as my teammates already said, is the most important weapon we have to fight the unhealthy foods that are already on the market. Because we don't believe that a fictional, arbitrary regulation that was made in 1997 about the foods that were new at the time, we believe that it's not up to date. We believe that it's useless to keep living under those conditions, even if we discover that those conditions are fallacies. We believe that it's not important when the food was produced. We believe the most important thing is to ensure everyone's safety, because trust in a product is not knowledge on what it contains, it's ignorance on what it could contain. And the only thing that could ensure the safety of citizens is an entity such as the EU in this case, that would regulate thoroughly every single product on the market. We don't believe that a database is the most useful way we can do this. We believe that firm, strict regulations are the only way to ensure everyone's safety. Thank you. I finished my speech.
Thank you very much for your fine speech. Lasted 7 minutes and 53 seconds. Just 1 second, please. Okay, if the panel are all okay, yeah, we can invite next the speaker from opposition team to take the floor whenever you're ready.
Just a few seconds. Can everyone hear me?
Perfectly.
So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Panel, imagine a country that discovers a few cases of malpractice in hospitals and responds by forcing every single doctor, including those with 30 years or flawless practice, to go back to medical school and retake their final exams before being allowed to treat patients again. That policy will not make healthcare safer. It will empty hospitals, delay treatment, and leave the sick worse off. That is exactly what proposition is doing to the European food system. Panel, proposition keeps repeating that obesity, high cholesterol, and diet-related diseases exist because of lack of a regulation. That is like saying car accidents, as I was saying to the PUI, to the third speaker, happen because cars are not strictly regulated enough, rather than because people speed, drink, or ignore seatbelts. The diagnosis is simply wrong. Let's be clear. These foods are already regulated. What is not regulated and cannot realistically be regulated through EFSA safety assessments is how much and how often people consume them. Obesity and high cholesterol are not caused by the mere existence of bread, cheese, or cured meat on supermarkets' shelves. They are caused by excessive intake. Here's the key point. EFSA safety assessments ask whether a food is unsafe under normal consumption. They do not and cannot stop people from eating too much of it. You could force every traditional food through a novel food assessment tomorrow, and obesity rates will remain unchanged the day after. If proposition were right, countries with the strictest food safety regimes would have the lowest obesity rates. That is simply not true. Many EU countries with some of the strongest regulatory frameworks still struggle with diet-related diseases because the cause is behavioral and societal, not regulatory absence. So when proposition claims the cause is a lack of regulation, they are confusing food safety with public health policy. Our site correctly identifies the real causes: misuse, overconsumption, and failures of education and enforcement. You do not solve those problems by retroactively regulating food. You solve them by regulating behavior. That is why the entire justification collapses. Panel, this debate is built on a disagreement about causation. Proposition claims that the remaining risks in our food system exist because there is not enough regulation. But in the European Union, foods already on the market are not operating in a so as I was saying, foods already on the market are not operating in a regulatory vacuum. They are governed by continuous safety obligation, national inspections, recall duties, post-market risk assessments, and alert system. No thanks, I'll take the POIs later. When harm occurs, it is not because the state is absent. It is because of overconsumption, misuse, isolated contamination, or failures of enforcement by specific actors. The problem is not the lack of rules, but how existing rules are applied. Proposition never proves that traditional foods are causing widespread harm because they avoided EFSA approval. Instead, they rely on an intuition that sounds appealing but is deeply flawed, that more regulation must necessarily produce more safety. Safety, however, depends on where regulatory attention is directed, and this is precisely where the model becomes dangerous. Throughout this debate, the proposition consistently blurs the line between food safety and public health. EFSA assessments determine whether a food is unhealthy and safe under normal consumption. They do not regulate how people eat, how much they eat, or the broader health effects of dietary patterns. When proposition invokes obesity, high cholesterol, or chronic disease, they are pointing to behavioral and social patterns, not regulatory failures. Forcing every traditional food through a novel food assessment does nothing to change consumption habits. It simply applies a technical tool to the wrong category of harm. So I'll take the POIs. Okay, no, I'll go on with my speech. Even if we are charitable and accept that some traditional foods involve risks, proposition solution is widely disproportionate. EFSA assessments are expensive, time-consuming, and designed for uncertainty. Applying them to retroactively to all foods overwhelmed institutional capacity. EFSA does not gain more scientists or more time under proposition model. Its limited resources are simply stretched thinner. This means less scrutiny for genuinely novel foods, slower responses to emerging hazards, and ultimately weaker consumer protection. Regulation that ignores opportunity costs does not improve safety. It undermines it. When we compare the two worlds, the contrast is clear. In the proposition world, safety gains are speculative, while harms are immediate and certain. Small and medium-sized producers face compliance costs they cannot absorb because food demand is price inelastic. Those costs are passed directly on to consumers. Low-income households suffer first. Traditional products disappear or become luxury items. And market power concentrates in the hands of large multinationals, reducing competition and innovation for everyone. In the opposition world, safety improves where it actually matters. High-risk foods are monitored more closely. EFSA focuses its expertise on uncertainty, not on foods with decades of safe consumption. SMEs remain viable, targeted public support becomes realistic, and consumers retain access to affordable and diverse food. This is not deregulation, it is intelligent, risk-based regulation. Panel. Proposition believes the cause of harm is insufficient regulation. We have shown that the real causes are misuse, abuse, and enforcement failures within an already robust systems. You do not fix those problems by tearing the system down and rebuilding it in the most expensive way possible. Just like forcing experienced doctors back into medical school does not save lives, forcing traditional foods through novel food assessments does not make Europeans safer. For proportionality, for real safety, and for the integrity of the food market. So I'll repeat fully all the examples that we made, and through our theme line, I'll explain why the opposition counter models is way more better than the proposition model. The proposition is bringing to us a model that is like taking a law for a terroristic attack and generalize it to all the urban areas that we have. It simply doesn't have sense. So panel's propositions problem isn't enough to bring such a model. That's why we are proud to propose. Thanks.
Thank you very much to the third speaker for opposition team, who spoke for 7 minutes and 56 seconds. This is the end of the first part of the debate, so we are now heading on to the reply speeches. And if the panel are all right, I would invite opposition to take the floor again.
Sorry, it is a problem if our first speaker talks from my computer because she has problems with the...
Sure you can.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, today we discuss the motion. This House would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. We heard about two very different versions of the world. Firstly, we both asked ourselves what the effect on public health safety would be. While the proposition said that by implementing this assessment, public safety would increase, but they were focusing on public health, which, as we showed them, is mostly linked to the US citizens' behavior and not regulament assessments. And then we also showed them where they were wrong. In fact, because implementing these assessments would cause the resources to be diluted, it would cause the system to become less and less efficient. So we would give less attention to actual risky foods. And this would cause the safety to decrease. Then the second point of clash that we found was about the economy. In fact, they claimed that implementing their policy would increase customer trust while also increasing innovation. But we showed them that it would punish small and medium companies, and it would cause an unfair competitiveness. Therefore, it would decrease innovation while also increasing prices and putting a strain on US citizens, on EU citizens. At the end of the day, we showed them a model that was actually implementable. We could actually implement our counter model because if we took into account the limited funds that the EU has, while they didn't, and they didn't give any attention to this. Our model will also bring real benefits to our society, both to the quality of life of EU citizens and our economy. It would help small businesses grow, and it would help tradition to stay a part of our life, while their model would only bring harm to our economy, since it would make it harder for small businesses to continue operating. And because of all these reasons, we are proud to oppose this motion and think we won this debate. With this, I end my speech.
Thank you very much for this reply speech. It lasted 3 minutes. And I would invite now, if everybody's ready, I would invite proposition team to close this debate.
Okay, I am ready. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening. In today's debate, the opposition has tried to frame the food safety as a matter of personal choice and administrative convenience. We, on the proposition team, have framed it as a matter of scientific responsibility and public health. So we have found 3 main points of clash. First of all, the opposition team has said that in their defense, that our food is essentially safe, and that the problem with the health crisis is a problem of overconsumption. But we don't believe this is true, because we've won this clash, because we have proven you that food is not safe, that there have been many recalls of products from the market, and that 90% of these recalls have been from traditional food. So therefore, we've affirmed that this is not safe at all. The second point of clash that we found is that the opposition team believes that our plan is damage to the economy, and it will create problems to especially small companies, which won't be prioritized by European Union, and will won't have the economic stability to face these more assertive controls. But we have proven to you that European Union actually has the money to finance especially small businesses, which are more fragile. So therefore, it will be especially the role of the European Union to try to support those who are in need. Not that expensive if we compare it to what the European Union currently spends for illnesses that are caused by the risk. So we've proven to you we won this clash because we've proven that our plan is not that expensive compared to keeping the system as it is right now. And also the third point of clash was in our plans. The opposition team proposed a plan which they thought that a database will be enough to regulate the products on the market, but we don't believe it is true. We've demonstrated to you that this plan is fallacious and it doesn't change anything. Meanwhile, we want to make sure that all foods are tested equally. And the only way to make sure that all foods are safe for consumption is for them to be tested with the novel food assessment. So ultimately, the opposition wants to change the food system to spreadsheet and historical assumption. But we want to manage through science. By choosing the proposition, you are choosing a system where safety is proven, healthcare costs are reduced, and the consumer is finally put before the industry's convenience. For those reasons, we urge to affirm the motion. Thank you. This is the end of my speech.
Thank you very much for your speech that lasted 3 minutes and 18 seconds. So, thank you very much for this fair debate. Round of applause for you all. That was very, very interesting. Thank you. And the panel and I will now move to the judge room. I would invite you not to leave if you want to introduce yourself to the other team, and we will be back as soon as possible with the adjudication.
Very good debate, guys.
No, ti prego, parliamo in italiano.
Giuro.
Dopo nel dibattito, ragazzi.
Vero.
Siete un po' posseduti voi.
L'audio.
Si sente tipo ogni volta che parlate.
Puoi ripetere che non ho sentito?
Siete un po' posseduti. Si sente tipo un casino assurdo ogni volta che parlate.
Sì, perché la nostra prima speaker, cioè il computer della nostra prima speaker ha deciso di non funzionare oggi. E quindi